Hello, folks. My name is William Bailey. Um, I am a new author, um, but been writing this book for years. It's called The Great Ship of Knowledge: Learning Earth's Deathly History. Took me 13 years to finish this book. I spent the last three winters with a professional editor. Released it earlier this year. You can find it at thegreatshipofknowledge.com along with my biography. You can get either the ebook or the paperback. Um, I'd like to share the dream that I had that gave birth to this book. And for those of you that follow me on YouTube here and have gotten to know me, I'm just I'm a no nonsense guy. I just don't BS people and just give you the truth. And if it wasn't for this dream that I had, this book wouldn't exist. And I write about this dream. I mean, it was a profound experience. It's not a very long section. It's in the front matter of the Great Ship of Knowledge, Learning Earth's Deathly History, but I'm going to share it here. Um, hope you it piques your interest enough to buy my book because it's an incredible journey. You will absolutely love the story. You can read the blurb at thegreatshipofknowledge.com. So this is absolutely truthful. I wrote it down as factual as I could remember it. So this is titled The Epiphany. Epiphany, a moment in time where one gains knowledge and a sudden revelation. Do you believe someone could have an epiphany, excuse me, folks, where they gain knowledge and a sudden revelation? I can't speak for you, but as for myself, I've had two vivid deja vus in my lifetime. I've also had three visions, with the one I awakened from just after midnight on the morning of January 1st, 2008, quite a while ago, being by far the most traumatic. Our bedroom was cool, yet I was drenched in sweat when I sprung awake next to my sleeping wife after having just suffered a frightening nightmare, one that left me terrified from what I had witnessed. My bones were shaking, my heart was beating loudly. I was anxiously trembling while hurriedly looking every which way until I was sure I was truly awake and safe. It wasn't so much what I saw, but how I saw it. It was a dreadful vision. It was surreal. It was a dream where I woke up in bed just as something powerful took a hold of my skull and twisted my head, forcing me to look in a certain direction. I sensed a powerful entity, and it had a goddamn hold of me. My eyes were forced open. I was powerless. I had no control over my body, and I was being physically forced by the invisible creature to look in one direction into the pitch black of the abyss. I was peering into complete nothingness. Darker than any dark I've ever seen, folks. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shut my eyes. Something was holding them open. I was paralyzed. Suddenly, a massive object unexpectedly materialized, seeming out of nowhere, upsetting the terrifying darkness. It was radiant, gleaming gold in color, a brilliant gold, and rectangular like an aquarium in shape. I had the distinct feeling suddenly come over me that I was being made to witness something in outer space. The gigantic golden aquarium sides were swelling with ocean-sized waves like stormy seas of liquid gold. It had no more than appeared into my view when the front of the golden aquarium split open down the middle from top to bottom. Without delay, two enormous golden waves swelled up larger and larger as they withdrew to the sides, opening the entire front of the glittering object. That is when an ominous appearing hammerhead shark-shaped spacecraft ejected violently from the confines of the massive golden space aquarium, along with the armada of stellar vehicles it was leading as they sped ever closer into my view. The hammerhead shark-shaped spaceship scared the living hell out of me. I felt like it was alive when it turned toward me as it stared me down for its next meal. Its jaw opened. Its baleful rows of upper and lower serrated teeth were obvious. It sped toward me on a ravenous attack. I was sure the massive shark-shaped space vessel was going to swallow me whole. In scale, it appeared much smaller. In scale, I appeared much smaller than just one of its pointed teeth. At the moment it was going to chomp down and devour me, it vanished. That was all I saw before I actually awoke. The whole event unfolded in what seemed like seconds. I know it doesn't seem all that frightening. Nevertheless, I awoke trembling in terror and was scared to death like no other time in my life. I mean, I was freaking petrified. It was a terrifying experience. And for what it's worth, I had two small marks about a quarter inch apart on my neck that hadn't been there when I went to sleep. They took forever to heal, and I still have scars where they once were. For a week after the vision, I was on edge, an emotional basket case. I couldn't get the frightening vision out of my head. It relentlessly haunted me. And I will tell you, people, this was really a bizarre experience. And I'm going to tell you, it terrified the hell out of me. I don't know why it's not like what I saw was overly frightening. But, when you feel like it's one of them dreams, you wake up, it's a dream where you wake up and you're convinced you're awake. But then, something grabbed a hold of my head and I could feel it and it twisted my head. I mean, it really scared the hell out of me. And I'll continue here. Don't mistake me. I've had a few nightmares in my life, but never anything like this one. This one was supernatural. I'd like to blame it on a surreal vision, on a life of abusing alcohol or illicit drugs such as LSD or some other hallucinogenic drug, but I don't take one or have anything to do with drugs. At times I might have a mixed drink at a party or a friend's house, occasional glass of wine, or maybe a couple cans of beer at the end of a hot summer day. I do like my beer in the summer. Okay, end of a hot summer day, I do like beer. Just is what it is. But I'm just not one to drink much. I don't quite know how to explain what happened. It was like seeing a clip of film you had watched before, and you knew immediately when you saw the clip the whole story to the rest of the movie because you'd seen it before. Yet it wasn't like that until I started to write down and describe what I had witnessed in a small notebook. And I will tell you, this is the only dream in my life where I've ever felt the need to write it down. That was on January 8th, 2008. And then it happened. The writing was like the key that unlocked something that was hidden in my mind. With minutes of starting to write, I wrote out the names of the chapters along with the plots to each chapter to go with what I had witnessed. I call this small notebook, hokey as it seems, my little book of dreams. I have this book, by the way. It was like the information that went with the brief imagery I'd paranormally witnessed had been downloaded into my head at the same time. You should know I have never had any aspirations to write. Totally the truth, people. I'm dyslexic, and short of this overpowering event, I would have never written a word. It's completely out of character for me to write. Yet I felt relentlessly goaded by some invisible force to write this story. I was unsure how to proceed. I certainly didn't know how to write a book. I didn't know what to do next to get the story out of my head other than try to write it down. And so I started writing. It was a painful process for someone who doesn't like to write, trust me. Yet I worked at it, and it was really a battle, folks. I'm in the real estate business, so shortly after I started to write the story, I showed another firm's listing to some clients of mine. When I showed the large 2-story farmhouse, the owner wasn't there, but obviously the owner was an avid writer. The rooms were filled with books on how to write in a multitude of ways. They were stacked and lying around everywhere. So it's totally true, folks. What are the odds, right? I'm not exaggerating. There were so many, it intimidated the hell out of me. I thought, my God, if I have to read half of these books to learn how to write, I'll never tell the story. How ironic, the real estate market had slowed in Michigan. Remember, we were in that terrible recession. To a crawl due to the hard-hitting recession. I'd hardly shown or sold any homes, yet this house was the one home I ended up in. I thought, what are the odds? There can't be another home for sale within a 100-mile radius, if at all, with piles of books strewn around in almost every room on how to write. It was as if they had been intentionally placed there by Satan himself to scare me away from sharing my vision with the world. I was already headed up a mountain with no climbing gear, so I sure didn't need the extra weight. All my life, I've just dug in and learned from my mistakes as I went. That is, I'm a bullheaded guy. I just dig in and make mistakes. Just that's how I learn, folks. This has certainly been no exception, and it has been by far the hardest thing that I ever set out to do. All thanks to this haunting vision. I felt pressured, as if I had to write down and tell the story. So I relentlessly toiled putting my vision to paper. And I did feel through this, even through this whole 13 years, getting this book published properly and edited properly. This more so at the beginning, but it's never went away. This unseen force, pushing me to finish the story. So I relentlessly toiled putting my vision to paper. Remember the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, where Roy Neary witnessed a UFO, after which he was obsessed with a vision of a mountain and doesn't know where, what, or why. At one point, he tries to shape his mashed potatoes. Remember that? He was trying to shape his mashed potatoes into what ended up being Devil's Tower in Wyoming. Well, that's pretty much, it's a great example of the way I felt for 3 solid months after the vision, while I wrote the first rough draft, and it was really a rough draft, folks, of The Great Ship of Knowledge, of Volume 1, Learning Earth's Deathly History. I would spend 20 hours a day, days and weeks on end, writing and rewriting. And it was pretty terrible, folks. Really has been a process. I'm sure my wife, Renee, felt abandoned during that phase, since she hardly saw me, even though I was just a few steps away, tirelessly writing in my office with the door closed. When she did come in to visit, she might as well have been talking to a brick wall, because I was so focused on finishing this part of the story, and more importantly, getting it out of my head, that I never heard a word she said. Once done with the first draft, I was burned out and I needed a break. I dearly hoped the vision would stop haunting me. When I completed the first draft, I shut the door to my office, leaving it behind. And I was able to stay away from the room for 2 or 3 months, even though a day never went by without me thinking of it. As if I heard it calling to me one day, I went and got the damnable thing out of my office before I sat it beside the sofa beneath an end table in our living room. I distinctly remember this. Then it just sat there, and I was able to ignore the menacing draft for a couple more months as my wife and I worked on a piece of investment real estate we had bought. It was on the Pere Marquette River. I drank my morning coffee as it continuously taunted and haunted me with its pestering presence. I thought that maybe if I got the manuscript out of the house and I could enjoy some peace, or I could enjoy some peace. It wasn't long after that thought that I met some people at a company party. It was a brokerage, realtors. 2 of them happened to be retired teachers, and one was active and was still active. I smelled opportunity and asked if they would take my manuscript and read it, or if they knew someone who would, just so I could be rid of its anguishing presence. They recommended a local English teacher. This was in Ludington. They suggested I just stop at the high school and introduce myself, and he would most likely help me. The next morning, I was at the school with the evil item in hand. They called the English teacher to the office, and when he saw me, he looked concerned. He appeared worried, like I was an angry parent there to confront him about something he had said or done to a student. He seemed relieved when I told him that a retired friend of his had recommended him to me about reading and broadly critiquing my manuscript. He said he would try. He asked me when I needed it back. I thought, is this a trick question? Keep it. I mean, as long as you want. If I get it back by Christmas, it would be fine. I replied before shaking his hand and walking away. Not a dozen steps out of the high school, I shouted, "Hallelujah." I was rid of it. That was September 16th, 2008. I'm sure he called his friend shortly after I'd left and said something like, "Thanks a lot for sending that 6 foot 5 inch, 260-pound crazed man to see and burden me with his manuscript." I do believe that's what he thought. Sadly, my feelings of euphoria didn't last, as though I had done something really bad. The story began haunting me worse than ever. It wasn't 2 days after I dropped off the manuscript that I printed another draft and worked away on it nonstop until I had a draft complete enough to send to an editor. As well as I thought that manuscript was back then, who I had paid $3,000 to edit it back then by an editor that I think knew less about the writing craft than myself, and that would be pretty difficult. Anyways, after which at that time I ordered 500 copies of The Great Ship of Knowledge, Volume 1. This was a first edition. Don't get it, folks, unless you just want something to set on your shelf. Learning Earth's Deathly History, printed at that time. At that point, while I was waiting for the printing company to print my books, I thought I should go back and retrieve my manuscript from the English teacher. I called the school, and as if he was waiting for the good news, he just happened to be in the office when the phone rang. He seemed elated that I wanted it back. He informed me that no one was in his classroom and that I could come and get it right away. He was seated at his desk working alone when I entered his classroom, devoid of students. From the looks on him working, he appeared to take his English teaching very seriously. Nevertheless, he did look up and smile upon seeing me. His desk was stacked full of books that were aligned neatly toward the front until they spilled into the adjoining table into a large, messy pile. Several posters of varying sizes of literary giants were displayed on the wall behind him, but only one picture grabbed my eyes and held my attention from the rival authors. It was a large poster of Ernest Hemingway, who had faded from hanging there so long. The great American writer looked to be keeping watch over the English educators who had taught in front of him over the years, maybe decades. Ernest was pretty faded. I explained to the teacher how shortly after he had accepted the first draft from me, I began working on it again, that I had finished my manuscript and was having it printed. Again, he seemed relieved with what I had to say, but this time perhaps because the haunting manuscript would be leaving his view. He congratulated me as he gave me a high five before hastily removing it from the row of books lined up at the front of his desk where my manuscript no doubt sat pestering him. "Here it is. Well, I'm glad you finished your book," he said, as he hurriedly handed it back to me like a hot potato. I thanked him and said I hoped he would be happy with my finished work if he ever chose to read it. I said goodbye and exited his classroom. I'm quite sure that as I walked out of his classroom and down the hallway with my manuscript in hand, I could hear him yell hallelujah after he leaped on top of his desk and did a happy dance in front of Ernest Hemingway. I don't know exactly what happened to me between going to sleep before midnight on December 31st, 2007, and the early morning of January 1st, 2008. It was New Year's Eve, but my wife and I never had a drink. Renee and I drank that night, and we retired early. Maybe God had some friends over for his New Year's celebration, and he left his golden kitchen to walk down steps made of clouds to his basement. Once in the basement, he proceeded to a soul cellar, where he keeps souls lined in racks like bottles of wine. Then he started removing souls from one of the racks before looking at them. As he read the life labels on the individual souls, maybe he thought, Tom Smith, no, not usually a good year, and put his soul back in the rack before removing another. Mary Jones, no, she needs to age a few more years, he said before returning her soul and her space in the rack and turning around to try another rack. That's when he pulled me out from a rack of well-aged souls and brought me close to his face to blow the dust from my faded life label so he could read it. Excuse me. To see angled me into the dim light of the cellar and put on his reading glasses, which were dangling from a gold chain around his neck. William Bailey. He can't write, no good at spelling, bad grammar, and a 1961 vintage to boot. Perfect. He should be ready to uncork. I think I will have him write a story for me to bring in the new year. My friends and I should have fun seeing what spills out from him. So he took me out of the dark cellar, back up the steps of clouds to his golden kitchen. Once back, he placed me on the bar top like any other vessel of aged spirits. He then opened a drawer to retrieve one of his vision openers that he uses to open the imagination of aged spirits. He read them out loud. A spectral color that man has never seen before. No, he said, before tossing it back and grabbing another. How to make invisible steel. No, he said again before grabbing another. Sinister looking hammerhead shark-shaped spaceship leading an armada of cosmic vehicles that eject from a golden space aquarium. This one, I'll uncork him with this one, he said with glee. Then he shut the drawer before he took the vision opener and placed it around my head as I slept, with part of it pushing on my neck and the opener's fulcrum resting on my shoulder. Then God pushed down on its magical lever, popping my soul cork and allowing my imagination to pour out. Well, the pages that follow are what spilled out of me after the Epiphany I had on the early morning of the first day of January in the new year of our Lord, 2008. I hope you enjoy this story, Unnaturally Born from a Supernatural Dream. And this is from the book of Joel. And it shall come to pass afterward that I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. Your old men shall dream dreams. Your young men shall see visions. And I will show wonders in the heavens and in the earth, blood and fire and pillars of smoke. The sun shall be turned into darkness and the moon into blood. So, folks, that's the Epiphany. It's short section in the front matter of the Great Ship of Knowledge, Learning Earth's Deathly History. And the other part in the front matter that is very important to read, by the way, is called the Geometric Progression of Technology. But that dream that I just shared with you in that the Epiphany, totally true. I spent the next, it took me 13 years to really get this book right and really give you what I feel is, let me remove that, an incredible, a lot of work, from a non-writer that hated English and, haven't wrote a few pages in my life. I was always in sales, writing purchase agreements in the car business, real estate contracts in the real estate business, but never, something like, you can see that. I don't know if that'll come in. I got the green screen on. A novel, over 500 pages. God didn't say, "Hey, Bill, I'm going to have you write a book," but I've always felt His presence was behind this. The Holy Spirit, whatever you want to refer to it, but just a drive ever since that dream to figure out what this is all about. And but I will tell you, when I started writing in that little notebook, it all came to me. And I was able to write the whole chapters out and have just a basic template of the story. And then it was the work of putting it on paper and thousands of rewrites, millions and millions and millions of words I wrote, through draft after draft after draft. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed that. I do want to tell anybody that's got my book that's always wondered if that was just, some sci-fi stuff. No, it actually really happened. And had I not had that vision, this book wouldn't exist, period. I would never write anything. I just, was never in my nature. So, hope you enjoyed that. And check out my book, thegreatshipofknowledge.com. The ebook, just if you want to know, it's $4.99. If you got Kindle Unlimited, you can download it for free. The paperback is like $19.95. If you have Amazon Prime, I believe it's free shipping. For those of you that do not want to deal with Amazon, just go to thegreatshipofknowledge.com, and there's you can order an author copy, and that book bypasses Amazon. You get it right from me. They are $25 though, just because I got to pay for shipping, and I'll autograph it to you or whoever you want it to. All right. Hope you enjoyed that, folks. God bless.